Hello and welcome to the program. My name is Michael Finney. Today, I am joined by my close personal friend and author, Heidi Hill. Would you like to say hello, Madame?
Hello.
We have been hosting Writer's Block for just about a year, a little over a year perhaps. In this time, we've learned a lot about each other. But for listeners of this program, maybe tell us some of who you are, where you're from, anything important in a biographical sense that listeners might like to know.
Well, I suppose I could start by saying I'm a native Californian. My family actually came here during the gold rush from Montana and Mississippi and all parts east. I have been writing since I was a little kid. I've done other things too. I was a magazine editor for about a decade or so. I've been a mom for longer than that. And I also managed to get a nursing degree in the middle of all of this chaos of my life. And I started writing seriously fiction during COVID. I think a lot of us had the time to do it then. And that's when I really was able to sit down with all these ideas that had been percolating in my head for years. And so here we are with a novel out, and I'm working on a novella and another novel, second follow-up to Songless, the Desert. Yeah, that should be out hopefully, so maybe some this year, maybe some next year.
Crushing it in the grand scheme of things, I would say, you know. I would like to hear more about the experience as an editor for a magazine. Maybe relay that to what skills or things that you learned there have continued to be valuable as a writer in this new effort as a novelist, a fiction writer.
Well, I think the most important thing about having been an editor was that I spent a lot of time fixing other people's writing. And so I knew before I started writing, it's like, well, I don't know if I'm this great writer, but I know I can fix bad writing. That much I knew and still believe. I can see it and I can fix it. And I think that was probably the most useful part to me that I took away. Well, in terms of writing specifically. And I knew that I could do that. So it's like, as long as I can get something down on the page, I know I can work with it. And I feel that's proved true. Now, the other things that I learned from being in publishing was when I understood the business side of it. I understood that what they had to offer was layout, cover design, and, marketing, I guess. But then also having worked in that, I did layout. I did cover design. I was the sign off on the covers for our magazine. I did all of the things that seem mysterious, I think, in a lot of ways to writers. And so I wasn't in the least bit intimidated by it. And I also knew that the only thing they could really offer me potentially was marketing, which is a continuous problem for us all. But at the same time, I mean, really, at this point, they're not really even offering that. They want you to have a social media presence. They want you to have all of this. So really, all they're really offering is to sort of take a bite out of my work. And I just, which is why I'm indie, obviously. So I think these are the things that I learned from that decade or so working in publishing. I understood, it wasn't a mystical thing what they did to me, what they do. Let me say that again. Their work is not a mystery to me. I understood it. So that allowed me to be much more confident in proceeding forward and doing all of the stuff myself.
You mentioned writing as a child, as a little girl. How much of that do you think carried over to your writing as an adult, or maybe even writing as a young adult or a teenager? How much of that effort or that understanding, that experience has a thread carrying through to the writing that you do now?
I would say all of it. I mean, anything you do carries a thread. There are some things that I wrote down. I still have notebooks from my childhood. I have a little box that my grandmother had made. It's basically just like a metal box, but she had painted it and all of this stuff. She painted it gold, and she put these Japanese and Chinese postcards on it, painted and glued them to it. So it's very pretty. And she'd probably done this in the 50s or 60s when that sort of style was very popular. And I've kept a bunch of writing from my childhood in it, and I still have it. And there are certain things in there that are in Songless, the Desert. Specifically, there was a dream I had when I was a kid that's always stayed with me that I used in the book. There's a couple of things. So all of those things accumulate and add up. They're all there. And, and I go back to them. I have poems that I wrote when I was in high school, and I can guarantee you they're all as melodramatic as a high school poem should be. But I've pulled some of them out and been reworking a couple of them. And, they're not, and, so it's sort of like a conversation with my younger and my older self. So I think, all of that stuff is of value. There isn't a piece of it that should be jettisoned. I mean, maybe you don't publish it or write it, but just the experience of doing it, it's the journey, and that's the part that matters.
Yeah, very good. I find when I look back at some writing that I can still appreciate it. Most notably lyrics, those I think still kind of translate across time if you were really dialed into some of that stuff. Fiction writing, I didn't really do a lot of. So I guess the things that don't carry over for me is maybe journaling. That doesn't necessarily play the same way. I mean, it's interesting to stumble on facts you might have forgotten about things that you were experiencing, but in terms of the writing there, just nothing useful in that sense. But yeah, the lyrics, I think, and you do that too in your songs, and I think there's a big crossover between lyrics and poetry in general.
Absolutely. And first off, I would agree with you. I have old journals. I started looking at them and I was like, these are memories I don't need to revisit. So I actually, probably in the last year or so, I threw a bunch of those out. So I hear you. I agree. Journaling is, it serves a purpose, and I'm not against it, but I don't know that it aids in the same way the old poems do, or an old story, or old song lyrics. I guess I should have mentioned that I was in a band for a while in my in another life, and so I have lyrics and songs, and some of that comes into Songless, obviously. And in fact, one of the songs in there is sort of a readaptation of a song that my band used to do. So I had to change the lyrics around a little bit, but it's in there. So it's kind of, it's a little special to me. It's a little Easter egg for myself, shall we say. But yeah, I agree with you. The stuff that I can use is the poetry. The journaling, I think it's a little, from what I could see, it was a little self-indulgent. and which is fine. I think journaling should be whatever you need it to be. It's literally just your thoughts at the moment that may, we're not all Jack Kerouac. We can't throw all our thoughts out and have them, be a bestseller. But yeah, it serves a purpose. But I would agree that the poems, the songs, not all of them, but some of them really are the things that sort of hold up. And maybe it's the intention when you're writing them, right? I mean, when you're writing a song, or a poem, or even a short story, you're thinking about it in a different way. You're immediately thinking about it to share with others. While when you're journaling, you're just sort of indulging in your own thoughts. Maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, fair. Now, let's be sort of boots on the ground in terms of the scene. I've been thinking about the scene more, not only, the publishing world at large, but the community that we inhabit. You've been hosting the Writer's Block for a year and a half, almost 2 years, I think, at this point. What have you learned? What have you valued out of that? How do you perceive it to fit into the ecosystem of what you do as an author? Anything along those lines? I just feel like we've been really lucky to be working together on that, and this is a chance for me to hear some of your incisive thoughts about it.
Yeah, it has been great, hasn't it? I think it's been a community builder for sure, and I think that's important. I mean, it's connections with other writers, it's sharing ideas, and it's discussing in detail things that writers do. What is point of view? What is, how do we use symbolism? We talk, what's the best way to do, what do we do with AI? I mean, these are all conversations that are just, it's wonderful to have a group of people who are sort of on the same page and being able to talk about that. And it's inspiring. And I think it inspires everyone who comes to that space. And I think it allows us to explore our ideas and, our creative intuition in a relevant way. And I would compare it very much to the experience I had as an editor, where I say, where you're practicing your craft, where I said, as an editor, I spent years fixing bad writing. And I think we do something similar to that as a group in the Writer's Block, where we're honing our ideas, where we're figuring it out. It's not, and I hope the metaphor follows over. I'm not saying that there's bad writing being fixed in the Writer's Block. I'm saying there are ideas being developed, and ways of approaching problems that you have as a writer, or challenges you have as a writer, are being discussed and explored. And that's kind of the same thing as just very, objectively fixing bad writing, and the concrete idea of fixing bad writing, we're able to sort of do that in an abstract way in the Writer's Block. And I think that's really, been of use to me. It really helps me hone my ideas, and I hope it's been of use to everybody else. I hope it's been of use to you.
Yeah.
I mean, you come up with some great topics for the space, and it really is, and you bring order to chaos in the space. So that's been an excellent addition and help to it.
I think that at large, all the voices are valuable, because the thing for me that I like the most is the topical conversation and hearing the voices and perspectives from around the table. yes, I like it to stay focused and drive through, the agenda that we have, but only as a vehicle to make sure that we get real perspective out of the people that regularly come. That to me is the purpose of it. And in general, while I like the people that come and hang out, we only have so much time to tackle the discussion. And that to me, to keep things, to provide some order in the chaos of conversation. That's for me, the point of that, to be able to make sure that we get everybody to think on and speak about the ideas. That's what I really like about it.
Well, I think that's a very useful place to be, right? You're that needs that. We need that. I mean, we can all fly off. I mean, I know I do to a certain extent, and so it's good to stay on task, and it's good to stay on the discussion. No, there needs to be. The plan is very helpful because it allows people to explore specific ideas in detail. So yeah, I mean, I agree.
And given that we do it once a week, I think that there's ample time to learn about each other, but then to also address all of these other concepts, like keeping narrow focused thematically or topically for 1 week doesn't ever mean that we're not going to get into these other things in the future. That, that's the thing too. I think we have been fairly thorough, over the course of this year, particularly about really enabling granular conversations that actually manufacture depth about that granularity. That to me has been a big help. And to go back to the thing that you were saying before in regards to AI and writing, bouncing our ideas off of LLMs to kind of find where the gaps are or fill in those gaps in our thinking to develop the outlines or the kind of pre-production conversations that we have in advance of the broadcasts. I think that has been a big help, not only in the sense of like shoring up the trajectory of the conversation, but also for me personally to interface with the LLMs in a very regular way and to be able to learn how to optimize not only the ones that I use, but how I use them.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we're going to have to use them. I mean, well, we don't have to, but everyone's going to be using them. And as a writer, obviously, I don't want them writing for me, but they do offer the ability to kind of bounce ideas off, and you have to be the ultimate arbiter of whether it's a good idea or not.
Yeah.
Because an LLM is going to push you towards a mainstream concept. It's going to not necessarily understand nuance
or challenge you.
It will not challenge you unless you fight, unless you force it to. It will stroke your ego. And, sometimes that's okay. Maybe you need to have your ego stroked that day. And, that's fine. But you need to understand that that's what's happening. You can get it to stroke your ego, and you can get it's reticent to be mean because it wants you to stay. So it's, I guess mean's the wrong word. Let's say critical in the same way that, say, a person would be about your writing. But let's be honest, most people aren't going to be that critical either because, they don't necessarily want to hurt your feelings. I mean, it's the same thing. The LLM is responding in the same way many people do.
Sure.
It's not necessarily going to tell you, hey, I don't think this is good. It will find about 20 other ways of saying it, which most people will do too, because they just nobody really not a lot of people are going to charge out in an attempt to confront you. It's not a pleasant place to be. It's a lot of work, and most people are going to respond negatively to being told something critical. And I think that's a really important part of the writing process is you're going to have to pay attention. You have to pay attention to some criticism to make your writing better. And that's very hard because there's a lot of ego mixed in. There's a lot of insecurity mixed in. And, it's a lot of people will just close the door on that. The other side of it, too, is if, say, you're really good, a lot of people will close the door on that, too, because they feel threatened. So, I mean, you're dealing, in a lot of ways, you're dealing with the LLM is giving you somewhat, not totally, but somewhat human responses to your work, although the LLM is probably not going to feel threatened by it. So you won't get that response, but it will placate you. I mean, these are things to know.
So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about your writing while we're on the topic of vulnerability. Let's hear about where the initial push conceptualization for Songless, the series, and Songless, the desert, the first entry in your world that you're making, this mashup of fantasy and Western romance, some would say as well. Tell us maybe some background, infrastructural things, influences, anything along that line.
Influences, C.S. Lewis, Jane Austen, Zane Grey. I mean, that's my mashup, I would say. Who else? Probably a little Tolkien. I think, I write with a very clear Christian worldview. And I don't apologize for that. I mean, I have a character in Songless called the King who is clearly God. So that is, obviously he's not technically God because I can't really write God, but that's what it is. So for me, it's I set it in a Western setting, sort of a alternate universe, alternate history of the Old West in America. The theme is a very American style type of Western. Now, it starts out in a valley where they're worshiping a tree to protect them from the vanishers who make everything disappear. Well, not everything, but make things disappear. And when something disappears, everybody gets all tense and kicks you out. They exile you. So this is the story. And they have these princesses singing to the tree to protect them. One of the princesses, Hawthorne, loses her song voice. The vanishers take it. So she is basically from a position of respect, authority, and, an elite position, shall we say, reduced to nothing within seconds. And, she's got to figure this out. And it doesn't really turn out the way she thinks it's going to, or to begin with. So I'll stop there. But in terms of the story, I think, I had a little kid, so I was watching a lot of fantasy, a lot of movies for little kids, fairy tales and all of that. We were engrossed in that world. And it comes out of that, and there are plenty of fairy tale allusions throughout the book. It almost started out as a children's book. It changed dramatically. You've read it. This is not a children's book. I think it may come off that way until you start getting into the weeds of it. Only in the first few chapters. You can tell me if you agree with that or not. But it gets very dark. There's the dark night of the soul in the middle of it. And so the idea came from that, and it also initiated a lot from my experience, dare I say, in nursing school when I was getting a bachelor's in nursing. Some of the darkness, some of the experiences there with a lot of the people involved in that training. Oddly enough, I had one experience where there was a young child in a pediatric rotation where he had drowned. He'd been underwater for 8 minutes. Paramedics came in, shot atropine into his heart, and revived. And I say this, he revived what was left of him. So obviously, if you're underwater for 8 minutes, you have drowned. You have died. They brought him back, and it was heartbreaking. I literally would leave that clinical in tears, coming home to my 7-8-year-old son at the time, and it was just, it broke my heart to see this little 4-year-old just gone for all practical purposes. As one of the nurses said, all this kid's got left to look forward to in life is, inspiration pneumonia and bed sores, pressure ulcers, as we call them technically. So it was heartbreaking. So I kept having this vision in my head of how could someone save this child who was unsavable. And I think that was an inspiration for it. And this story started sort of coming, growing out of that idea, because it was so frustrating to see this. What had happened was there was a party, and they had an above ground pool, and the kid, they're supposed to take the ladder away. One of the teenagers who was there didn't take the ladder away, and the kid got in, and they found him at the bottom of the pool. So this is the thing. So it's like that was where the seed of this whole story came from.
While we're on this cheerful theme, let's go into your experience with the audiobook, which is now live. It's out after a long road of production and manufacturing. It is finally in the market.
Yes, it is. It took me a long time. That was a learning curve. I had no real background in doing that. And I figured it out. I suggest that to everyone. Just it can be done. And so, yeah, it's out. I'm very proud of it. I think I did I had a lot of challenges. One of, not the least of which was my equipment breaking near the end of it. So we limped past the finish line on that one. The audiobook is out. I, encourage you to listen to it. I'm pretty proud of it. I don't know what else to say on that. That's a little happier note than where I.
What do you think was more work or a more enjoyable experience, writing it or producing the audiobook side of it?
Well, I think obviously writing the novel was more work. It took longer. Maybe I started it in 2020, published it in 2023. I might have started the audiobook midway to maybe in earnest, probably the beginning of 2024. It took me a year and a half to do that, mainly because of the learning curve. A lot of false starts, had to figure it out. So, but they're both very challenging. And the book was obviously harder. It's harder to write the story than to just read it. But at the same time, I think you have to read it well. You have to perform it. I will say that after doing an audiobook, I have a whole new respect for actors and their abilities and their intelligence in understanding the material they're given. Because you can't just read it. You can't just read a story. You have to perform it. It has to be enjoyable for a listener. It's not just, you're not reading a form. It's a story. It has to live. And you think back to like Homer and, and Milton and all these great writers. They performed these things, the blind bard, they called him. I mean, these great stories were performed. So I think that's a really great tool for a writer to have if that's something you're drawn to. I mean, I had a background where I did do some performing. Again, I used to sing in a band. So, so for me, it was something I wanted to do. And so I really kind of threw myself into it. And it was enjoyable, just as enjoyable in a different way than writing. But it was part of it, and I'm glad to have it as my skill set. And I'm going to keep doing audiobooks for my books. Maybe means I publish slower, but I don't know. Does it matter? It's the journey, right?
Speaking of the journey you're on, the work you're producing now, what can people expect from you? Now, I know what you're working on. I've been beta reading some of this stuff, but where are you headed next? We know that The Desert was volume 1, so we have to assume there will be some other volume, but perhaps there's even more out there.
Well, the second book in the Songless series, the main novel, is going to be The Fort. It's written the rough draft, first draft, past a rough draft. I'd say the first draft is written, and I've started editing it. I had to finish the audiobook. That became my raison d'etre, just my reason for living at that point was that audiobook. So that is out. So The Fort will be the next main book. I'm optimistically looking at getting it out next year, early next year. I think that's the reasonable response, If that's the reasonable thing to say, we'll leave it at that. Now, I have a novella that's also really close to being done, as you well know, sir. And I am looking at getting that out this year, maybe the fall. Yeah. And probably I'll have an audiobook for that too. Now, the novella is a shorter piece. It's an ancillary piece, and I've liked this idea, and I think I'm going to do it for The Fort too, because I have an idea for that. So The Fort will be the continuing story of my two main protagonists. So they will. And so they will be, what their life is like going forward after the desert and what they're going to be doing, because there's more to do in this particular segment of the Songless saga. So, and then the ancillary novel is sort of a prequel. It's called The House That Jack Built. And it's about my male protagonist. And he is sort of a cavalry soldier, is the best way to explain him. And he is, this story happens before he meets Hawthorne. And it's basically about him finding his himself as a servant king, shall we say, in the biblical sense. His role in the world, who he sees himself as, he's defining it in this story, is the best way to put it. You can speak to it if you want. So this is sort of a prequel. It happens before the desert, but I mean, you could look at it in either way, but it's a lot shorter piece, so you can get a feel for things from it. I have another idea for an ancillary with a couple characters I'm going to spin out from The Fort. I'm working that out in my head. It's in there, and it is demanding access to this world, so that will happen. Now, there's a book 3 to complete this section of the Songless saga that I have a rough draft for, which will be the third book. It'll be like a 3-arc story. I try to write them as complete as possible. I don't really have cliffhangers per se, but the story moves forward, and it's like, I don't think anyone wants to read a 1,200 word book. So, because they all seem to be around 400 or 500, about 1,200 words each. 120,000 words each for the larger books. So we'll see how that plays out. But I have the Valley rough draft already. I have some ideas past that, but they're very vague at this point. So, that's where the whole Songless world stands right now.
Are there any things that we have not discussed here today on this recording, or that you would like to say that you haven't yet said?
I think what I would like to say is I have chosen to do sort of these mythic Westerns because, the thing started out as I love horses. So I wanted horses in them. You got to have a world before cars to have horses be relevant at all. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So that's where the time frame came from. But as I was working in this world, I realized that this is a very American world. This is our mythos. The Western, I don't think I'm saying anything anyone doesn't already know, but the Western, they are our knights. They are our heroes. And I believe in that. I believe we have to have our heroes. I believe we have to have that. We have to have our happy endings. We have to have, this American sense of who we are in our mythos. And although I'm dealing in an alternate world with a king, which sounds very much like something we shouldn't have in a republic, we kind of do have a king in our republic, being, God. And I'll stand by that. You can disagree, but that's my feeling on it, is this Christian God who is king and of this world. And these are the themes I will explore. And I think that's very important to think about as we go forward, is to understand our own mythos, our own culture, and to really elevate it, sort of in the same way Percy Grainger, if you know the composer, as a British composer, went out and found all these little country tunes. And the country tune, everyone said, why are you doing those? The Lincolnshire poppies, right? He said, these are beautiful songs. Listen to them when I elevate them into this great music, Same thing that Tolkien's doing with the Shire. He's elevating the simplicity of these people. He's making them mythic. They're the ones, it is the little tiny hobbits who save who finally who do the hard lifting. And so I think that's kind of the spirit of my work ultimately. And that's why I ultimately am very glad that I found this, this concept of the Western, the mythic Western, and that the Western found me. And I thank the horses in my life who made it possible.
Hey, Heidi, thank you for taking the time talking today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on, Michael. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Always good to have a chat with you.
This session was always destined. We just had to get to a good point in your work to be able to utilize it to help cross promote and stuff.
Absolutely.
But as always, a joy to talk and, even learn some things I didn't know today.
This is probably true. I mean, you don't necessarily ask me questions like this.
Right. Yeah. Good opportunity. Well, thanks again, and we will talk again before too long.